soul give thanks to the Lord, and all my being, let us sing. My soul give thanks to the Lord, and never forget our song. The Lord fills us with goodness, renewing our youth like an eagle. The Lord does deeds of justice, creating rest. My soul give thanks to the Lord, and all my being, bless His name. My soul give thanks to the Lord, and never forget God's song. Lord, what we are made of, remember we are dust. Like grass our days are over, but mercy never ends. My soul give thanks to the Lord, and all my being, bless His name. My soul give thanks to the Lord, and never forget God's song. Bless the Lord, all you angels, you servants of the Lord. Bless the Lord, all creation, all works of God give praise. My soul give thanks to the Lord, and all my being, bless His name. My soul give thanks to the Lord, and never forget God's song.
Good evening, and we welcome all of you to this celebration of Carol Dunphy's life. We welcome the people who are here at the Mother House, those who are in St. Louis, in Denver, and wherever else you are, El Paso. Now, let us pray. We gather this evening to remember Carol Dunphy. We know we have to return to you, O God, the lives of those whom we love. While we are together, we love as we can. We share as we can. We influence each other, often without being aware of when or how. And then we have to let go. We believe, O God, that you welcome Carol into your life and love. Amen. Let us be seated and listen to the biography by Eleanor Craig.
A remembrance of the life of Carol Dunphy, born March the 12th, 1922, and died February the 19th, 2015. Carol Mae Dunphy was born in Eastlake, Colorado, the first of 4 children of Arthur John and Edith Louise Mulholm Dunphy, both Colorado natives. Carol's sister Lois was born a year later, then Arthur Lynn and Phyllis followed. Carol said, "We grew up on the farm that belonged to our Danish grandparents. It was not a large farm, but had an irrigation pond where we swam in the summer and skated in the winter. I followed my father around and learned to milk a cow and drive the horses and the tractor that pulled up the hay stacker. Carol attended the two-room schoolhouse at Broomfield, Colorado for her first 8 years. Since the district had no high school, they paid Carol's tuition to Holy Family High School in Northwest Denver, where the Sisters of Loretto taught. Carol already knew Loretto from catechism classes in her small town. Graduating from high school in 1940, Carol went on to 2 years of business college, then gained secretarial experience in a law office. By then, the Second World War was underway, and the Waves was just being organized as a division of the US Navy. Carol joined the Waves in October of 1943, and later she wrote this about her experiences. I spent 3 months in training at Hunter College in New York City and at Iowa State Teachers College. I was sent to Yeoman School, where we learned the Navy's system of correspondence. I did clerical work in a communications office in San Francisco for a year, and then did the same type of work in Pearl Harbor for about 9 months, at which time the war ended and I was discharged. I enjoyed the experiences I had in the service very much, and have never regretted the time I spent in it. We had joined to serve until the end of the war. I was tempted to sign up permanently, but decided to use the GI Bill, get a college degree, get a job, and buy a car. I attended Webster College through my junior year and then entered the Sisters of Loretto. I did get my degree, but never bought a car. When we changed the veil in 1953, however, I was one of the first to get a driver's license. In Carol's third year at Webster, in January of 1949, she consulted with Sister Edwin Mary, a favored teacher, and with her family, and then wrote to Reverend Mother Edwarda. I have decided that I should like very much to put in my application for Loretto. I have spoken to my family and they agree that if it is what I want to do, I should go as soon as I can. Carol was received into the Sisters of Loretto December 8th, 1949, alongside Marian Andrews and Webster classmate Elizabeth Ann Compton. Both would be her close friends for 65 years of religious life. Carol's younger sister Lois had entered the novitiate in 1941, receiving the religious name Sister Mary Carol on April the 25th, 1942. So Carol became Sister Peter Michael, a name she got from a favored author, and which she used until 1966. Immediately after her first vows, December 8th, 1952, Carol returned to Webster College, completed her degree in English and Spanish, and began teaching at Erink's Hall in Webster Groves, Missouri. Her first principal was Sister Mary Luke Tobin. Carol made her final vows August 15th, 1955. 2 years later, according to the bull still in Carol's file, she was transferred from Erink's Hall to Loretto Heights College, where she had a light teaching schedule and full responsibility for the freshmen and sophomores in St. Joe's Hall dormitory. In 1959, she was changed again, and in 1960, she volunteered to go to South America. Later, she wrote, I like to say I had a good reason and a real reason for volunteering to go to South America. I can't explain the real reason too well. I had a strong feeling I should volunteer. I knew I was a bit over the age suggested, but I had been teaching Spanish. It was almost like the call to my vocation. My good reason was that I had received my master's degree in English in July of 1959 and was assigned to be principal and superior at Bishop Tulane High School. In order to be principal in Alabama, I still needed 6 hours of chemistry, 6 hours of biology, and 6 hours of social studies. Who wouldn't volunteer for South America? Carol's companions in establishing Loretto's first mission in South America were Sisters Eva Marie Salas and Mary Peter Bruce, both bilingual in Spanish and English. Carol strengthened her Spanish by going to Puerto Rico in the summer of 1966 to Monsignor Ivan Illich's course of preparation for missionaries from the U.S. headed for South America. The three sisters left from New Orleans for South America on the steamship Gulf Farmer in early October. The receipt for Carol's $365 fare is still in her file. They passed through the Panama Canal and disembarked in Arica, Chile. On November the 3rd, 1960, they arrived at La Paz, Bolivia, and in February of 1961, opened Colegio Loreto. Carol's first task was directing the building renovations. She said, "My teaching experience had prepared me with grammar, but not vocabulary in Spanish. So I did a lot of pointing in hardware stores and got along pretty well with plumbers, electricians, and carpenters." In 1967, feeling she had done what she could do in Bolivia, Carol returned to the States to teach again at the high school level at Broadway in Louisville. She assumed the position of principal there in 1971 at a time of stressful transition in the student body and in race relations in Louisville and the nation. Carol's files include a monograph that she wrote for the Kentucky Education Department, describing a staff development process she initiated to help the Broadway faculty find positive directions for the school. Sadly, 2 years later, Carol presided over Broadway's closing and the sale of the property. Carol returned to her earlier secretarial career, first as administrative assistant to the president of the Senate of Religious in Louisville. And in 1975, she moved to Denver to work in a program for Catholic Charities for the resettlement of Vietnamese refugees. Then as secretary to Sister Loretto Ann Madden with the Colorado State Legislative Committee. Pardon me, that's the Colorado Social Legislation Committee. In 1980, Carol became a member of the Loretto staff, serving for 2 years as social advocate, and then devoting 20 years as administrative assistant to 3 Loretto presidents: Marion McAvoy, Maureen McCormick, and Marianne Coyle. All 3 recall Carol's efficiency, competence, vast knowledge of events and schedules, eye for detail. But mostly, they recall her generous disposition, unfailing good humor, and the way she would laugh about the 3 presidents' very different work styles. Marion McAvoy said, "We were each so grateful to Carol, and the community should be grateful also." Among Carol's papers, several short biographies and letters from South America attest to a lifetime of service to country and community. Less tangible, but no less significant, the happy school memories of hundreds of high school and college students and the gratitude of 3 presidents resound to her memory. Underlying all these public contributions are tender friendships and close family ties, which testify to Carol's loving and generous spirit. The Loretto community is indeed very grateful for Carol Dunphy and for the more than 65 years of life she shared with us.
This is a reading from the book of Proverbs. Hear and receive my words, and the years of your life shall be many. On the way of wisdom, I direct you. I lead you on straightforward paths. When you walk, your step will not be impeded, and should you run, you will not stumble. Hold fast to instruction, never let her go. Keep her, for she is your life. The path of the just is like shining light that grows in brilliance till dawns the perfect day.
Your presence gives me untold joy. Your presence gives me untold joy. Preserve me, God. I take refuge in you. I say to the Holy One, you are my God. My happiness lies in you alone. You have put into my heart a marvelous love for the faithful ones who dwell in you. Your presence gives me untold joy. Oh God, it is you who are my portion and cup. It is you yourself who are my prize. The lot marked out for me is my delight. Welcome indeed the heritage that falls to me. Your presence gives me untold joy. I will bless you, God. You give me counsel. Even at night, you direct my heart. I keep you ever in my sight. With you at my right hand, I shall stand firm. Your presence gives me untold joy. And so my heart rejoices, my soul is glad, even my heart shall rest safe. For you will not leave my soul among the dead, nor let your beloved know decay. Your presence gives me untold joy. You will show me the path of life, the fullness of joy in your presence, and at your right hand happiness forever. Praise to you, O Trinity, wisdom, love, and might, our Maker, Savior, Comforter, eternal joy and heart. Your presence gives me untold joy.
Several years ago, Mary Ken Lewis and Marty Liley put together a book of psalms, hymns, and canticles written by Loretto retreatants who had made retreat with Marty and Mary Ken. Carol wrote this psalm, Weather Watch. Spring, summer, fall, winter. May our lives respond to happy or hard times with great cheer. Fall and winter need not be times of fear. All will pass. Think of the joys awaiting in summer and spring and be filled with hope. God's love and care don't depend on seasons, but are always present. In times of stress, we just need to believe that all will be well. In times that go well for us, we live with gratitude. Let us be grateful in all changes of weather. God is always watching, loving, caring, and there. Never forsake God.
And now, if you'll give us a little time, we'll prepare for remembrances of Carol.
I was in the novitiate with Peter Michael, and Martha used to always call her the beetle. And I understand that she was the oldest in the class. But Peter Michael could speak very good Spanish, English, but she also spoke Pig Latin. So we called her Meter Pikel. And I think Lois said she had a book on Buddhism? Oh, okay. Anyway, I just want, and there's also one last thing. There's only 3 people in the Loretto community that knew about this shark smile. So it was Meter Pikel, Ron Murphy, and Mary Joyce, and Carol. So now there's only one person that knows how to do that smile, and that's Mary Joyce. And the only time we used it, and when I first came here to the Mother House, I said to Carol, Carol, can you still do that shark smile? And she did it. So we used it anytime that we weren't happy with things that were happening. Anyway, it was fun. She was a great lady.
My name is Lupe. I live here at Loretto. I did not know about Carol's shark smile in Bolivia. That would have been helpful. As you know, Carol was in charge of transforming this big mansion into a girls' school. And unfortunately, in La Paz, there was no Acme construction company or somewhere where she could go Yellow Pages. So somewhere she found this man called Tomas. There was a painter, an excellent painter, self-employed. So she negotiated with Tomas about painting this room, and it was very well done. So then she was going to give him more work, and he was very soon going to paint the whole building, plus put a mezzanine, because the floors were so high. So this particular contract, Tomas was poor. He worked from job to job. He said, I need so much money to buy the paint, and I'll be here Monday with my helper to start the job. So Monday came and Tomas didn't show up. And after a few days, he shows up and is embarrassed. No paint, no money, and he's asking the Madre Superiora for more money to buy the paint. Carol is very angry, as you can imagine. She can't talk to him. So she sends me. She's in one room and he's like several rooms over there. And he said, sister, go tell Tomas that I'm very upset with him because he didn't come on Monday as he said. So I walk over and I said, Tomas, the Madre Superiora says blah, blah, blah. And he's smiling. He was always smiling, a little mustache. He said, Madre, would you please tell the Madre Superiora that my mother-in-law had a birthday and we had a big party and I spent all the money with the party. So I need more money to buy paint. So I go, wow, over there. And I said, sister, Tomas says, I repeat, and then she goes, tells me, go tell Tomas, whatever. So this went on for about 30 minutes, back and forth. And we both knew that Tomas was going to win and get more money. So that's what happened, but it was funny at the time and sad. Another thing I want to say about Carol and her big, big blue eyes, when in Bolivia, there were 2 voltages, 110 and 220, and they were in the same wall. So you had to be very careful. Everybody that came in, be sure you plug in the right outlet. So one of our girls, Celia, I don't know if you remember Eva, she just loved the Madre Superiora. And she said, you know what, sister? The Madre Superiora has, her eyes are 220 voltage. So, yeah.
Agnes Ann. I was fortunate to work with Carol in the social advocate office in Denver, the 2 years. And one summer, I think, it was at least nice weather, was not this weather. She and I took off in the Dunphy trailer, and everybody knows that Dunphy mobile, and drove from Denver to Boston. Now, I could drive on the open road. What I could not do in that machine was shift in reverse. It never worked. So anytime I had to go in reverse, Carol sitting there had to shift, and then we could proceed. But we did very well because she drove through the cities and I drove in the country. But I remember that time, just very, very special time. Didn't seem like it took us very long, but I know that we had fun along the way. We visited Mary Knoll. We went through Washington, D.C. and circled New York City. But it was a time when she was, as always, calm, cool, collected. Nothing got to her. When we got to Boston, and any of you who know the eastern cities know that those streets are very narrow, not like Colorado where we have boulevards in every little side street. But downtown Boston was under repair. And all the one-way streets went the other way. And somehow she negotiated all of it in good humor. And of course there was no air conditioning, so she was mopping her brow. She kept a little bucket of water with a washcloth. And that's how we got across the country. But it was just a very special time with her. And I remember Carol as one of those people who was unflappable. Nothing ruffled her feathers as far as you could tell. But it was just a real treat to have that time with her, and I really cherish it.
I lived with Carol, as you know, for many years in Denver, but I am not talking about that this evening. I'm saying more about it tomorrow in the homily. I wanted to raise up a facet of Carol's life that I think often has not been lifted up, and that is her dedication to peace and justice. Long before the I am the way mantra, we work for justice and act for peace, became part of our heritage. Carol was busy at that already. I just want to lift up a few examples from the years from 1975 on in Denver. Her first job when she came to Denver then was with resettling Vietnamese refugees, a job that could be just part of the corporal works of mercy, but also, as you can imagine, because of the history of the Vietnam War, was also a case of justice. After that, she took a job as the administrative assistant to Loretto Ann Madden, who was the Colorado Catholic Conference lobbyist, so highly respected by everybody in the Colorado legislature. Carol was very instrumental, I think, in helping LA pursue her goals. She used to spend every Monday morning gathering up all her supplies for the meeting of the Colorado Social Legislation Committee, which met at the 14th Street Baptist Church every Monday at noon. And she was responsible for the goodies there. But she also used to come home and chuckle because LA's column for the Denver Catholic Register was due on a certain day. And she said, so Loretto Ann spent a good part of the day having me clean off her desk and sharpen pencils and do all the things that some writers do to delay the deadline. But Carol was well known among the state legislators as her boss was. And of course, that job involved a lot of issues of justice, especially for poor people on the state and the city level. Then her next job, as Agnes Ann noted, was as the social advocate for the Loretto community. In the meantime, and a couple years before she took that job, we had set up our disarmament committee, of which she was a member. And it was in that committee especially that she did so much work, but always behind the scenes. A couple of examples. One of the things we asked Carol to do was to manage our audio-visual department. In those days, which were pre-internet days for the most part, We had a big array of films and audio tapes, books, other publications that Carol would repeatedly keep on the mailing circuit as people requested them. And that in itself was a big job. And then one of the most helpful ones was during the nuclear freeze campaign that many of you may remember, in which the big goal was to collect signatures to persuade our Congress and the president to initiate an agreement with the Soviet Union to freeze nuclear weapons at the level at which they were. I'm sure that all of you signed those petitions. But in Denver, in Colorado, we had a very active nuclear free statewide campaign in which both Carol and I were involved. I was the editor of the newsletter and she was the secretary. I remember so well that when the People's Fair occurred in May of that year, this is a huge fair in Denver with all kinds of booths of crafts and of nonprofit organizations. She and I would haul card tables and chairs from our house to set up a booth in the Esplanade at East High School, where the People's Fair was then. And Carol would sit there patiently and talk to people and ask them to sign the petition. Things like that were just part of how she operated. And many people, I think, when they think of leaders in peace work in Loretto, would seldom think of Carol. But I think of her very much with a lot of gratitude.
Another part of Carol was her great love of sports, and especially the Denver Broncos. And it's hard to get news here in Kentucky other than horse racing and basketball. So Carol was the go-to person if we ever wanted to know a schedule or a score. Carol would be the one who would know that, and she often taped the games also for those of us who went to bed early. But she was just great about that. And you just, in the morning, I'd call her, Carol, who won, and she'd know the score. So I'm going to miss that part of her, as well as, of course, all the other many gifts that she was to us.
There are so many things, about her that I could talk about, probably to be a book or something like that. But all of you have reported very, very well on what she has done. I have one very short story, and probably the most recent one that has happened. The day that she went to God, there were 4 of us having dinner at her table. And being the slow poke that I am, I was the only one eating. Everybody else had finished. And so she kind of turned to me. Usually she didn't, she didn't move much at all. But there were 4 of us, Judy and Louis and Carol and myself. And so she said, "What's that?" and pointed to something on my tray. And so I started naming what was around. And she would go, no, not that, not that. And so finally, I picked up a cookie that was lying flat on the tray. So I picked it up and I said, "This?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Would you like to have it?" And she said, "Yes." So I gave it to her, and she took it. She broke it in half, and she gave half to Lois, and she took the other half. It was just, to me, so meaningful, like her blessing of the bread, of the cookie, and then giving it, to them. So I just wanted to share that it's with me still. It'll be for quite a while. It was very, very strong.
When I was in high school, Sister Peter Michael was one of our principals. We had 3 and 4 years. But I want to talk about an aura that she had, that she spread to the people who she taught, and I guess also to the people who she worked with. She could be stern at times, but generally underneath that sternness was a smile and an encouragement to do whatever you needed to do. I just know that the spirit in the house was very good, and we noticed it as students. One other thing, she left after 1 year, I'm sure, to go get ready to go to South America, because on her way there, she stopped again at McGill, at Bishop Tulin, and talked to the girls. She must have had a good influence again. 8 girls went to the convent at the end of that year. And trying to remember, I think I'm the only one left. But it was a spirit that permeated almost everything she did. That smile behind the stern was the way I think of it.
This is Carol Ann. And mine's probably trivial in comparison, but I had the privilege of sitting next to her in church, she in a wheelchair and I here. And often the books would go to the floor and I'd pick them up and I'd hand them to her. And often the response was, "They slipped off." Or, "I wasn't sleeping," but she was always sleeping at the kiss of peace.
One of her favorite things was someone said pig Latin. Well, she did that also, but she really liked the Spoonerisms. And the one that she learned first and said the most was the Tox who lost his fail, the fox who lost his tail. And she would say that. I remember at this one meeting we were at, excuse me, the leadership had to go away from the rest of us to consult. So we sat there and she was reciting as many as she could remember. But I found the book in her room, Stoopnagel's Spoonerisms. So if you ever want to learn a Spoonerism, look me up. The one that she started with, "Pardon me, Padam, this pie is occupied. May I sew you to another sheet in the rear of the church?"
Some of these things she got, first of all, from the Saturday Evening Post. She and Mother would stay up until midnight or so reading the Saturday Evening Post, and I think that was where she got her start. But if anybody wants to learn one, you can come and I'll let you borrow the book.
You need to go to Denver or St. Louis?
Okay. We have folks in Denver who have stories to share, so we're going to go there, and then we'll go to St. Louis, and then I'll open it up to the folks who are at home. So if you've got a story, if you're at home and you've got a story to share, if your camera is on, you can physically raise your hand and I'll be able to see you, and I can, I'll name who it is, and then I'll unmute your mic. If your camera is off and you have a story to share, you can either turn your camera back on so I can see you, or you can just unmute yourself and go through and share your stories. So first we're going to go to Denver. And Denver, you've got a live mic.
Hello, it's Maureen McCormick, and I was one of the fortunate ones that had Carol for an administrative assistant during 8 years when I was president. And because Carol had been there as Marion's administrative assistant before me, by the time I was there, she knew everything about the office, and it was just very smooth sailing. And Carol was so efficient that she made the job of being president very easy. I just was thinking also about the wonderful times that we had at Vrain House, lots of celebrations over there, and when people would come to town to see some of the people that lived in the house, we were invited, and it was a wonderful, wonderful place to be. So I'm just, I know we're all going to miss Carol very much, but now she's having God renew her youth like an eagle.
Vicki Schwartz. I was stunned the other day when I read about Carol's death. I think she's one of the people that I just never thought she would ever die. And so that gave me a lot of pause. We've had a couple snow days, so we had enough quiet time for a change. And I spent some time thinking about Carol in 1954, when Mary Swain and Denise Ann Clifford and Sylvia Potler and I were entering our freshman year of high school. Carol taught Spanish and freshman religion. I remember clearly Denise Ann and I were sat next to each other in the religion class. So as I pondered those thoughts the other day, I was so touched with my deep gratitude, not only for Carol, but for all of the wonderful Loretto women who did such a fantastic job of teaching at Nearinks during those days. I'm afraid I'll forget one of the names, so I'm not going to name any of them, but you know who you are.
You can probably move on to St. Louis now.
Okay, thanks, Denver. St. Louis, you've got a live mic if you have stories to share. We can't hear you, St. Louis. Trying to take care of some technical difficulties there, I think. Get the mic on, maybe. Any luck yet? Nope. Okay, we're going to move on to the next place then. Sorry, St. Louis. Sorry to miss this. I'm going to mute you for now. All right. For the rest of the folks at home, is there anybody who has a story to share? If you actually physically raise your hand. Okay. We're going to go with Barbara Nicholas first, and then Maureen O'Connell. And then if somebody else has anything else to share, just feel free to pop your hand up. Okay, Barbara, you've got a live mic.
Thank you, Rebecca. This is a story about Carol, who found herself larger than life one time. I was telling her a few years ago that I had the opportunity to go through the Panama Canal on a cruise ship. And she said, oh, when you do that, make sure you pay attention to the names of the locks, especially the last lock. So, of course, I was paying careful attention to the names. And the very last one that you go through when you're going from the Atlantic to the Pacific, the name on that lock is Pedro Miguel. So she was telling me how proud she was to see her name there called to the Pacific when they were on their way to Bolivia. And it's just a special memory of her that I hold on to and experience her loss with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Maureen O'Connell, I'm going to unmute your mic, and then I think the next person I saw a hand from was Buffy. Go ahead, Maureen.
Yeah, I have to say a few words about my buddy Carol Dunphy. I've got a little bit of a cold, so that's why my voice is a little strained. My relationship with Carol started when I was back in the early 70s, when I was a young, fresh teacher, and she was the principal at Loretto High School. And I really didn't mean to get myself or her into any trouble, but periodically I did. And like there would be a speaker, I would get an African-American speaker for one of my classes, and maybe 2 days later, the person would get arrested in a sit-in, and all the calls would start from parents to both Sister Frances Jane at the house and to Carol. And it's both of them really always had my back. I don't take this for granted, but Carol would let me know people were calling, and that she would tell them it's important for students to get a variety of perspectives in education, and so that she, in her steady, calm, matter-of-fact way. So I really always appreciated that. I wanted to just say, piggybacking on Cecily, that besides her work at the school, Carol was always involved in the community in Louisville. It was at the height of the civil rights time. She was involved with the West End Community Council. I think she was always involved with the League of Women Voters in any place where she ever was, and had a real keen, astute, and very effective way of being at Loretto High School in Louisville at that particular time in the school's history. I just always valued that so much. Mary Swain and I and several other people had the good fortune of being with Carol, living with Carol at Havern House, which was right next to the Loretto High School, where in the evenings you'd see her playing solitaire, use cards then, not computers. But the value of living with someone who was gentle, matter-of-fact, even-tempered, a great storyteller. We heard spoonerisms all the time. Just a great human being, was a great influence on me. I know in the last few years when I've had more time that I've been able to spend at the mother house for meetings often, but I've also had time to spend time with Carol, and it's been a real treat. She would always call me Little Mo, and I would call her Little Carol. That was from our Havern days. But she also talked about what she called an open door policy and the infirmary that she had. Like, she wanted her door open so that anybody who wanted to visit could come in, and that sometimes staff would come in and tell her their troubles. And she knew so much about people's personal lives. I mean, she was very confidential, but this was really like one of her last ministries that she really, really very much believed in. With Alicia, Carol and I would talk about sports, and especially when Denver and Tennessee came together by Todd Helton playing on the Colorado Rockies for so many years, and he was a University of Tennessee man, and then of course Peyton Manning when he came to the Denver Broncos. So we would always check in with each other about sports. I am going to miss Carol so much, as I know many of you will.
Okay, thanks, Maureen. And we're going to go to Buffy and Jane. You're live.
Well, there's so many things about Carol. You know, I was her technical assistant before Rebecca in the early, I think it was I'm not sure it was the Marion or the Maureen days when she got her first computer with WordStar, a Margaret Grace gift to all of us. And it was a difficult learning, but she did it, and she hated it when we went to Microsoft Office, even the early versions, because it was yet another big change. But did she gripe? No, she just did it. Which leads me to the next part is when Maureen talked about solitaire on the computer. She played Free Sale, and she played the games in numerical order. She would ask for each one by number, and if she couldn't get it, she'd stop. Then she'd come back to that number. And she was stuck on one for months, and they told her every game was winnable, and she was going to win them all. And so I sort of heard when they found her in front of her computer that it was on, but no, sadly, she had not beat the last solitaire game. And then the sports, sometimes my judgment is not always the best. So a couple years ago, Maureen O'Connell might be able to tell you when, the St. Louis Cardinals were playing, I want to say Philadelphia or somebody like that, and it was only on TBS. And they didn't get TBS at the Mother House, but they did get it at the Cozy Corner. So I made arrangements to take her to the Cozy so she could see the game. Well, some of the sisters didn't think that was so very appropriate and that my judgment was somewhat flawed. So fortunately, Kay and Lurdy had TBS at their house, opened their house, and we all went and watched the Cardinals beat the Philly. I think it was Philadelphia. But she loved her game. She didn't have a problem with going to the Cozy. It was some of the others who didn't think I was so very smart. So she was a great, great, great friend. I too loved being with her, visiting, hearing the stories, hearing about the family. You know, she had such a great love for her sister Phyllis, and not only Lois, but Phyllis and Phyllis's kids. And, you know, they do different wonderful things for them. And, you know, remember when one of the nephews put the little ramp on the Rain Street house so it didn't have steps? She was so proud of her nephew who did that. Just great pride in her family and great love for her family. So we'll miss you, Carol.
Thanks, Buffy. All right, anybody else? Barb Roach has her hand up as well. And I know we've got Angie Murphy back in St. Louis that we're going to try again. Barb, I'm going to give you an unmute mic. There you go.
Thanks. It's Barbara Roach, and I just wanted to say I never had the privilege of having Carol as a teacher, but I figure she must have been a really wonderful Spanish teacher back in the day, because when I worked at Narrance, there was a woman named Kathy Julius Vogt, who was a couple of years, maybe a year ahead of Vicki and her crowd, who became a Spanish teacher and was recognized throughout the state of Missouri. She won many awards. After she retired from classroom teaching, she worked at Webster with the student teachers who were student teaching in Spanish. And she always said the reason she did that, went into Spanish, was because of Sister Peter Michael. And when that class had their 50-year reunion, Kathy organized a group of them to go to Loretto to visit her, and Francis was still living at the time, and probably a couple of other of their teachers down there. But I feel that through Kathy for sure, and probably lots of other people, Carol's teaching has extended into current generations of teachers, that she was such an inspiration to others.
Excellent. Thank you, Barbara. Anyone else? We're going to go, looks like Marianne Coyle. Marianne Coyle, give me just a second. I'm going to unmute your mic. All right, you've got the floor, man.
Well, this has been truly a wonderful time of remembrance of Carol. And I have so many, many wonderful stories that I could tell. But actually, what Maureen said, Maureen McCormick, was so true. What I always remember of Carol is that if we were going off to a meeting, she would put everything in order, even in one of those folders, you know, where you can see what you're going to pick up, what comes next on the agenda, blah, blah, and going all the way through. So Carol made being president of the community a fun job, just because she was Carol, and she was always, even though she sat to the side, took the minutes of the meetings verbatim, she was always there doing what she did best and then bringing it back so that we could do it together. So thanks, Carol.
Could I speak to Cunningham?
Of course, please do.
Well, I washed my hair this morning because I knew we were going to be on this, but somehow the picture is gone. So please know that I'm, well appointed this today. I have so many stories about her, and the thing I thought about when they were talking about the books slipping off her lap, I thought she slipped off in a way that I would love to slip off. It was a shock, I know, to all of us, and but she was so good and so funny, and I was so proud of her. She stayed several times at our house in Kansas City, and she would either sit there with my pops and watch the ball game while my sister and I went shopping. We couldn't get her to come shopping with us, but there were just one time we got, you'll know this, you Kentucky people, we have a yard full of snow out here, but I remember one time in KC, we went down the front steps. She and I, we were going to go to Safeway to get something for my sister or my mother to cook. And it took us 45 minutes. We got down to the street from our house, down the steps, and it was so icy. And the two of us were sliding around and falling and carrying on. And we finally got back without getting to Safeway. But Anyway, I could go on and on, but I think it's time.
Thank you very much, Marianne Cunningham and Marianne Coyle. All right, let's try St. Louis, and we can see if we can get Angie Murphy on here. Fingers crossed.
All right, this is Angie.
Wait, am I ready?
You are ready. We can
All
hear
right,
you.
this is Angie Murphy from St. Louis, and my memories go back to the 60s, a time of many, many changes, and Carol was always there for them. I remember the time when we're changing from our habits. We wore gray habits down there, and as someone said, Carol has these beautiful blue eyes. Well, Carol went out and got 3 boats of blue material for all of us to have like a uniform blue habit. And we laughed about that because it did look really good on her with her blue eyes. And about driving those roads in Boston, I can easily see how she could drive those without any problems because she had no trouble driving through the mountains in Bolivia and down to the lower regions. And she was always our wonderful driver, taking us different places in Bolivia and also daily picking up our young students in La Paz. And the final thing is that we did build 2 other buildings in La Paz. And the last one was named after Carol Hall. In just a minute, EA wants to say something too.
Well, as long as we have a mic. Elizabeth Ann and Carol and I went to the novitiate together. And I remember telling Mary Bede was my mentor. And she said to me, "Oh, I just found out that Carol Dunphy is going and she can be a rock for you." And I thought to myself, I don't even like her. So how could she be my rock? But she did indeed become my rock. And we talked, the other funny thing in the novitiate, Carol would giggle so badly during church that she'd stuff the handkerchief in her mouth to keep, and that would make us laugh even the more. But anyway, I grew to love her very much. We talked every Monday, and so we kept in close contact, and I will miss her, especially on Mondays.
Okay. Anybody else? Just want to make sure I'm not leaving anyone out. All right, then I think I'm going to turn it back to you, Mother House. And hang on one second. Yep. All right, Mother House, you're on.